So, hi everybody. Hopefully you can see us both well. Is everybody muted just for sound quality before we get started? Okay, great. And of course, there's question and answers after. Just briefly, we're gonna let people in a little bit early and also stay on a little bit longer after the class is over, just to give folks a chance to talk to each other if they like to. I may interrupt you in the first, like before the session, just once Geshe gets down so we can get started. But then after the teaching is over, please feel free to stay for, 15, 20, however many minutes you would like to talk to each other. And Geshe's like, you have so much to say. Sorry. And just a reminder, of our events this month. Next Saturday is the Chakra Samvara commentary. Sunday is our regular teaching. The weekend following that is a weekend off, but then after that, we are back to weekly Sunday teachings. So our weekly Sunday teachings will be back in action as folks also come back from the summer and are maybe more available. And on the 30th, we have a public event at the Burlington Library. Okay, that's okay. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
So firstly, Tashi Dele, greetings to all of the Dharma friends. Geshe hopes that you are all well and he hopes that you are all happy. And can everyone hear both Geshe-la's voice and my voice all right? Okay, great. Okay. So our gathering today, all of us making the effort to come together here, we are coming together for a great reason, for a great purpose. So why are we gathered together here today? Why is this a great purpose? Because we are gathered together for both the welfare of other sentient beings and ourselves. We are gathered together for the purpose of working towards the happiness of ourselves and others. And in fact, if we think about it correctly, we can see that, in fact, this is the very greatest possible purpose, the greatest possible use of our precious human life. And in order to be able to achieve that happiness, which we have talked about, then it is very important to train in the three trainings of hearing, contemplation, and meditation. But of course, to work towards that lasting and perfect happiness, we also need it to be sustainable. And so that means achieving that temporary happiness, that momentary happiness in our day-to-day lives as well. Huh? And of course, we also know, right, that there is a little bit of unsteadiness in our experience of samsara, of cyclic existence. It's a little bit like the waves on the ocean. They're ups and downs. And so what does that mean, the waves with the ups and downs? That means in our experience of samsara, there will be moments where we are relatively happy, and there will also be moments where we are relatively unhappy. So through our engaging together here, listening to the teaching, doing the question and answers, our engagement with the Dharma becomes, as Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, it becomes a source of steady joy. Gasem tempochik. So keeping that joyful attitude as we engage with our Dharma activities and maintaining that stable joy is something that is very important. If we're not able to do that, it can be an obstacle, yeah? And if we're able to maintain that joyful mind, if we're able to maintain that happy mind, we know that there is a connection between our physical state and our mental health as well. So with this happy mind, we will also have a healthier and more stable body, right? We will have better physical and mental health. And so you might say, well, okay, that's true. Like we are trying to achieve this stable happiness, but sometimes despite the practice, those moments of unhappiness are still unfolding. However, what we would say to that is, yes, those unhappy moments come, but through training in the reasonings that we have learned, through working with conditions and transforming our mind, we are able to reduce, diminish, and eventually get rid of those moments of unhappiness. So that's really the essence or the purpose of the Lojong, the mind training teachings, is when those obstacles come, when those unfortunate conditions come, to be able to transform them into the path, and also from doing that, to be able to diminish them and clear them away. So of course, that would be the preamble, and then Geshe would just ask you, that we proceed together happily and joyfully, because whether we are formally a Buddhist, somebody who maybe formally believes in the Dharma or not, whether we are a secular person who doesn't necessarily believe in the Dharma, there are lots of things we're going to discuss that are reasons for happiness here. And so as a preliminary practice, let us just take a moment in meditation to settle our body and mind. So the nature of the sky is something clear and vast, but we know that sometimes momentary conditions such as clouds and so forth obscure the sky's true nature. So in the same way, just like a gentle wind clears away those clouds and reveals the vastness of the sky, through settling our mind, let us clear away distractions and restore its clarity. The body and the mind are relaxed, are unencumbered and peaceful. Think that the mind is vast in the same way that the sky is incredibly vast. And so let us cultivate the close placement of mindfulness, in particular, close placement of mindfulness on the body. Direct your mindfulness to the external part of your body and also to what's happening in the internal part of your body. What's happening in the outer body? What's happening in the inner body? What's happening with the coarser elements of the body and with the more subtle aspects of the body? And think, Ludi Kyundang. And then think about our relationship with our body. How can it give rise to afflictions or to positive qualities? For example, if we grasp at our body too tightly, it can give rise to attachment. And we look at the faults of the body, we see that it arises and is a cause for samsara, for cyclic existence. However, on the basis of this body, we can give rise to another body, which can liberate us from samsara. This samsaric body, in other words, this body that rises up due to karma and affliction, we understand that in the big picture, it can only give rise to difficulties and suffering. However, if we look at it from another angle, it is this human birth and body that we have, which allows us to practice love, which allows us to practice and bring forth compassion and these positive qualities. So in this way, the body also affords us advantages. In the final cultivation of the teachings, it's on the basis of this body that we can achieve not just temporary happiness, but also work towards the causes of ultimate happiness. Through being able to distinguish between the faults and the positive qualities that we can bring forth and generate on this basis. It is through that kind of wisdom that we can take the essence of this precious human life and make it worthwhile. So I want to apply these instructions so that I can take the essence of this human life with all of its freedoms and richnesses. I will make prayers and requests for the blessings of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas to be able to do that. So we'll do our Yeah. We still haven't found. Geshe is asking about the mallet to the singing bowl, which closes our meditation. The mallet still has not been found. Okay, so we'll do the prayers. Okay, I don't see the option for our sound. So I'm just gonna hope that the sound is okay. Yeah. It's just short prayers in any case. Tumbai chom den de jin ba dra chom ba yan da ba zo be sang re ba dang sha su dem ba de wa she ba je den gem ba ke bu du we ka lo gyor wa la na me ba la da min ham gi them ba song ge chom den de pe gya wa sha gya tu ba la cha ze lo je de gyab zu ji o Tumba chomden de dejin sheba drachong ba yang daba zobe sanje reba dang shazu demba dewa sheba jiden chemba chebu duwe karo gyowa lana meba lada mi namgi tumba sangye chomden de pe jawa shakya tuba la chaze lo chudu gyabzu ji o Tumba chonden de dejin sheba drachong ba yang daba zobe sangye reba dang shazu demba dewa sheba jiden chemba chebu duwe kalo gyorwa lana meba lada mi namgi tumba sangye chomden de pe jawa shakya tuba la chaze lo chudu gyabzu ji o. Do the short mandala offering. Saji begi jo me do ram ri rab linji ni de gembadi sangye jindu me de buvaye Njogun namada jinga chebarjo idam guru ratnam hendalakam niryatayami. So the last prayer is the refuge and bodhicitta. Chedon sogi chenam la jancho bardu dani gyalse chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi jola benjir sange jobar sho. Chedon sogi chenam la jancho bardu dani gyalse chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi Jola benjir sange jobar sho. Chedan sogi chenam la jangshe pardu dani gyapsu chi. Dagi chenyen gibe senam gi jola benjir sange jobar sho.
Yeah.
Listen.
So when
we talk about the way to engage with the Dharma, we know that it's very important to pay attention to the activities at the beginning as well as the activities at the end.
On the
basis of engaging in the activities at the beginning and the end in the correct way, then the actual session will unfold very successfully.
So in terms
of this motivation, most of you are familiar with the story of the glorious Atisha when he was walking around the Mahabodhi, the great enlightenment stupa in Bodh Gaya. And he was contemplating what type of mind could one bring forth that would be most beneficial to sentient beings. And as he was contemplating and circumambulating, eventually the sky became filled with countless emanations of Venerable Tara. And the Taras instructed him that there is no mind more beneficial to sentient beings than bodhicitta rooted in love and compassion.
So there are
many different motivations that we could bring forth, many of which are wholesome. But in terms of the king of motivations, the supreme of motivations, it is this bodhicitta rooted in love and compassion, right? Especially from the point of view of the Mahayana.
And so that
means that when we bring forth the minds of love and compassion and bodhicitta, this brings forth great benefit in accomplishing the practice. And because this bodhicitta mind that we are bringing forth is such a powerful, virtuous mind, because of its incredible power and benefits, of course, there's going to be obstacles when we first try to generate it. So if we're feeling kind of depressed, right? If we're feeling a little bit unhappy, right? Then it's going to be very difficult to bring forth that supreme mind of bodhicitta rooted in love and compassion. Is everything okay? I'm getting some feedback on my sound here. Is everything all right? Okay. And so actually what we do if we're experiencing some difficulties, if we're experiencing some obstacles in trying to bring forth this motivation of bodhicitta rooted in love and compassion, what we can try to do is start with a foundation of equanimity, a neutral state of equanimity within the mind. And so as a preliminary for that, it's also very important to get the body into a state of equilibrium. So we can do a meditation to bring forth those four elements, earth, fire, wind, water, into equilibrium.
멜론 하다바 누지스 아니 우싱나라 수바 세라바가다 네스 몽보 지알 때 강가세 이지셀 바거세 그마스요 소바지.
So think like just if you breathe ha on the surface of a mirror, that condensation gathers into one small point before disappearing. Think that our coarse consciousnesses of the 5 sense doors and so forth. Oops. Okay, sorry, something just came up on my screen. Just want to be able to see everybody. No worries, Kimberly. Okay, I also am recovering from a cold pretty badly, but I'm sorry to hear you're in hospital. Okay. We just did a new setup on Zoom. Okay, so now we can see everybody again. All right, my apologies. So to go back before technology disturbed things. So just like we breathe ha on the surface of a mirror and that condensation dissolves into one point, just imagine like that, your sense consciousnesses, the 5 sense consciousnesses and so forth, these dissolve into the more subtle mental consciousness.
좀 메비선스 간지 지나요 셀 이지셀 파턴이라스 유한지 차면 받아 레레 쳐서 소바.
And think that just as we've dissolved those coarser sensory consciousnesses, also that the mind, any sort of disturbing mind, any sort of distractions and so forth, these also dissolve into the subtle consciousness. And we also dissolve this into the 4 elements that come into harmony.
세 고로 로징이네 좀마 다 레레 어다든지 돈요 세 아버지요 소바지.
The nature of the mind is something pure and vast and clear. So relax into this fundamental mind's nature.
리카보 할레비 쭈마노지 치시카보 모보카르 야바이나요코 로사요케가 다 든지가 쭈마요 보지.
So think that in this way, right, the mind of equanimity, this neutral mental state, it's a little bit like a beautifully clean white piece of cloth. We can dye that piece of cloth blue, red, yellow, or any color we like.
든지가 세 쭈마야 보데. 무지 강가를 펜베가 다세 숑바도 이지가 쇼리야. 저기 소바지.
So I'm going to try to take this vast, clear mind and bring forth qualities through which I can really achieve the welfare, the benefit of others. So let's imbue this vast mind with the qualities of love and compassion.
마도 던도 아주 시와 통과야래. 뒤에 체면도 나로 와리 주고 이제 설다와이나 예지마도 다 라세아지 좀에 선바대고.
To establish this love and compassion, let us think about all of the 6 types of sentient beings in samsara, the human and the animal beings that we can see, as well as the beings that we can't see. And contemplate how, due to interdependence, there's not one single one of those beings who I can say is not close to me. There's not one single enemy in that vast assembly of beings. They're all precious.
된다 자체산이 따와도 디세 림볼 파 림볼 따와 이네 다 강가 까리 첨보지마도 까리무치게 생지지 좀에
We think in a vast enough way, and certainly if we think far back enough, we can see that at any point, any one of these beings may have shown us kindness. So contemplate how there's no enemy here because every last one of these beings has been kind to us, has shown us great kindness.
대달 절레야 쇼테다 수지지 공부 마토는 마토 바다 대토 문제 대이자 말로서 나세야 대세제 대도게 제다 수지 차토 가서 이 선바데
And think that it's only with the accomplishment of complete enlightenment, full Buddhahood, that I can repay the kindness of all these dear beings in the best possible way. So think that I call the I, that I call the self. May it reach the state of complete Buddhahood, full enlightenment, so to be of maximum benefit to all beings.
럼바통보네 다 가빙원이 돼야게 내지지라 다들 할래야겠다 기보지 내지 여보지는 소지
So think this feeling of closeness, all these other points that we've contemplated, these are positive things that bring forth a great joy in the mind. They're nice to think about. So we'll pause there.
예성아
어디서?
어다 대폭에 좋아요 보지 마셔 봐라 얘네지는 수지가 깨야 돼 순기야 돼 튜게야 되지 가서 더더 손을 대서 그 아래스
So to really kind of bring forth that joy, right, from developing that motivation, one of the things that can help us with this is to have a good understanding of the qualities of the Buddha's holy body, holy speech, and holy mind.
나로서 나세 대아디와 손지지 가서 쳐도 봐이나 현재 요즘 대저 도야지세 간디지 요아 깨야 돼 알레 릴라워치 봐이나 어다 깨게제 티발라 때네 까와요 그거 현재 메가 마통 안조 마고 와다 더가롱 게 게제 더가롱라 때네 아니 안조 거야 메가 도야 때네 로지 뭐요 아레스
So if we think about why we want the I or the self to achieve Buddhahood for all sentient beings, we can think about how Buddha's qualities are able to benefit sentient beings in the best possible way. So if we think of the qualities of the Buddha's holy body, for example, we know that from this holy body, lights and nectars can manifest and enter sentient beings who are experiencing difficulties. It is said that there are many occasions where through emanating these lights and nectar, the Buddha was able to restore sight to those who were blind. He was able to restore hearing to those who were deaf and so forth.
어다 수게 때를 찾아봐 얘는 뭐 자토 뭐가 좋아한다면 자토 뭐 또 와이나요 수지라 때네 레지가 강갈 코로레 만나와 고건도 요아레스
In terms of the qualities of the holy speech, it is said that even if people asked hundreds of questions over 1,000 years, with one phrase, with one utterance, the holy speech would be able to perfectly answer all of those questions.
저절로는 지나 그게 치시에서 지바이나요 마지기를 걸어서 봐서 어떻게 손지가 내라 마tin 내라스 가시가
Yeah.
가시게서는 다음에 되대 가시 다음에 때마다들이 뭐도 번에야 걸어서 만나고 고자래
So sometimes what would happen is after the Buddha would give a teaching, his followers, they would take away whatever understanding was best for them. So there would be occasions where after the Buddha's teaching, people would say that, yes, the Buddha, he was speaking about selflessness today. Others would say, no, he actually gave a teaching on impermanence. And so there would sometimes be different understandings on the part of the disciples. So that's the quality of the Buddha's holy speech, is that it will be understood in a way that is exactly in accord with the need and the capacity of the particular disciple who is listening. And so, right, these qualities of holy body and holy speech are possible because of the holy mind that can perfectly understand and penetrate all.
So
really, if we think about the qualities of the holy body, speech, and mind of the enlightened one, then we can see there is real reason, right, to aspire to this enlightenment.
So why
are we joyful here? Because this self, this I, right, that is us, it can definitely become this fully enlightened being that is capable of benefiting others. So isn't that something that is joyful to think about?
So this
is a samsaric body, right? It's the basis of like a cyclic existence, but at the same time, it can accomplish these incredible things. So in order to be able to reach that, then we will look at this text of the commentary on the 7-point mind training.
So
one of the qualities that Geshe mentioned previously about the 7-point lojong or 7-point mind training is that it is brief, right? There's only really 7 points of cultivation. But the amazing thing is that within all of these 7 points, every bit of information we need to be able to reach Buddhahood is contained there.
And
also for that reason, right, to make it complete, there's a lot that is included in the preliminaries. Yeah. So the first of the 7 points is the preliminaries, and the text, the root text of the 7-point mind training instrument. I was like, I don't know, I lost my faculties of speech after talking about the Buddha's holy. Yeah, clearly an ordinary being, right? So the first is the preliminaries, and it gives the instruction, first train in the preliminaries. Yeah. So we say preliminary, right? Preliminary to what? Preliminary to what? The preliminary to arising, to generating bodhicitta. Yeah, Geshe, I just want to make sure, is everyone still hearing us okay with the sound? Okay, yeah. So the preliminaries are the preliminaries to the arising of bodhicitta. So in terms of how the preliminaries are enumerated, different teachers and commentators give them differently. Some say there are 3, some say there are 4, some say there are 5, and so forth. So if we were to say 5, for example, we could say that the first of these 5 is the practice of the Guru Yoga. So we could say this in 2 ways. We could say Guru Yoga, but if we approach it from just an exclusively sutric perspective, we could say the way to rely on the spiritual teacher, the way to rely on the spiritual teacher. So the second would be the freedoms and endowments of the precious human life, how they are difficult to find and how they have great meaning. If we can't develop, this point's really important, because if we can't develop conviction about the rarity and the great meaning or preciousness about a human rebirth, di somitubna dene. If we can't really develop conviction about the rarity and the great meaning of the precious human life, then we won't be able to take the essence of this human life. And if we develop conviction about how precious a human life is, actually what this means is that we will be able to bring forth consistent, joyous effort necessary to be successful in our practice. You have to have a feeling that if I were to waste this precious human rebirth, the opportunity of this, that would be a great loss, right? Conviction like that. Yeah. So one of Geshe's friends used to joke, of course, in the Buddhist cosmology, right? The time before this, human beings had much longer lives, right? They would live even a couple of 100 years, right? So he was saying that would be like a precious human rebirth. Not so sure about now. And so we have to know that, right, like this human body that we have, it's like on loan to us for a fixed amount of time, maybe even for a few more days, right? It's not ours indefinitely. So the third point is the meditation on death and impermanence, meditation on death and impermanence. And so as a beginner, right, approaching this topic of death and impermanence, it may be a little difficult, a little bit uncomfortable at first, but it's something that is like really super important. Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, right. Right. So what happens with the result of contemplating death and impermanence correctly is that our determination to accomplish things, the timeline is rolled back. So the practice that we had sort of put off until doing next year, we have the determination to do it this year. And the practice that we had put off to do in a few months, the determination comes to do it this month. The immediacy to want to engage in the practice, that's what comes through this contemplation. Yeah. So it is said that this is the reason, it's from really developing conviction about this point, that many holy beings, right, they took very little or no sleep, right? It's from conviction about that point. Yeah. So Geshe wanted to be clear, he's not advising us on that for us ordinary ones, right? We need to get enough rest so that we can function, right? But this is how the holy beings practice. Because actually, like if we push ourselves too much when we're not at that level yet, when we're still a beginner, we compromise our physical health, right? And that can be a big obstacle to our practice. So we have to know where we are. And it is said that one of the practitioners of this lojang or mind training, they kind of laughed only one time in their lifetime because they were so busy practicing Dharma. I was joking with Geshe, that doesn't sound very joyful. Norbu.
Rinpoche reach.
Ale, losa losa.
Zizi part the tiendo yare, Zizi.
Ale, losa losa.
Zizi Yimachi Robazon Pabisha Yaris.
Ale,
But
losa.
Telegamuchi shows on Aslamat.
Ale.
Temato Gamushon Yumaris.
It was said that the only time that this practitioner laughed was when he was in his meditation cave or his meditation hut, something like that. And he saw Tsitsi Norbu Dangyamdurwa.
Zizi Rinpoche Richi.
Yeah.
Kando Sarwa.
Kedroge.
Zizi Yanda Bishajan.
And he saw two mice. The first mice was trying to pull some kind of precious jewel, some kind of beautiful mineral, but it wasn't strong enough. And so another mouse was also pushing to make it possible to move it. And it is said that he laughed because of that. So Geshe said there's more to tell about this story, which maybe we can come to later. So we covered the third preliminary, which is death and impermanence. The fourth preliminary is meditating on karma or cause and effect. So it is said that in terms of these 4 points, if we are able to cultivate these correctly, what we can do is completely eliminate the obstacle of laziness. And in addition, this fourth point of meditation on karma or cause and effect, this will help us to subdue our body, speech, and mind, to set our activities of body, speech, and mind in a good direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So you may know also, thinking about karma in a more subtle way, there's the story of Geshe Ben Gungyal, right? One of the great Kadampa Geshes. And probably many of you know the story when he had set out a beautiful arrangement of offerings. He checked his mind and he realized that he had set out those offerings because there was an important person coming to visit who he was trying to impress. So kind of disgusted with his worldly concern about the offerings, he covered those offerings in incense dust. So the story goes.
And the important visitor who was a lama, he said that in terms of this land of Tibet, the one who is supreme in making offerings is Geshe Ben Gungyal. So meditation on cause and effect, really the kind of immediate thing is it helps us to accomplish virtue, to amass merit very, very effectively. As we contemplate cause and effect, we will naturally develop a dislike for engaging in what is unwholesome, and we will naturally develop an inclination, a liking towards engaging in what is wholesome. So that's the benefit of that. Number 5 is contemplating the faults of samsara, the faults of cyclic existence. So why do we contemplate the faults of cyclic existence or samsara? Really one main purpose, to bring forth the mind that definitely strives towards liberation, the mind that can happily strive towards being free. That's the purpose. We know, right, from the point of view of the faults of samsara, that no matter how happy someone seemingly is, no matter how powerful or wealthy they become, right, that status that they have found is not something that is stable. There comes a point where it degenerates. So this is an example of the faults of samsara. Yeah. So merely from somebody being in the world, we can't say that they definitely possess a samsaric body. Yeah, so we can't say that in every case, that because there's a physical body that is in our earthly realm, that this is a samsaric body. Why is that the case? Because if he or she, if that person is able to free themselves from being under control of karma and affliction, the physical body that they inhabit is no longer considered a samsaric physical body. So one of the reasons that we are practicing right is exactly for that purpose, to abandon that the karma and of the body under the control of karma and affliction. And if you really think like, can I strive towards that body which is not under the control of karma and affliction? That really comes to the question of like, how determined are we to really find a lasting happiness or not? So that I, or the self, right, it inhabits this body, but in terms of the different kind of physical bodies or containers of it, there are the samsaric bodies and the bodies that are separated from samsara. What about the sukme kam? Sorry, Geshe thinks I'm being smart. I wasn't trying to be smart at all. It came into my brain, so I asked. So Geshe said that the mind is never right, separate from its body. But then I asked, well, what about the formless realm, right? Because like you think those beings in the formless realm are pure consciousness, but Geshe said actually there is a form. It's just extremely subtle, so it can't be seen. So sorry about my impertinent question. Oh. So that we call body and mind, right? They are traveling together, but in terms of the body, there are different types of bodies. Yeah. So in this way, we've done sort of a recap of these 5 preliminary points. So hopefully you have some additional things to think about here. So you can think, okay, there's actually many branches. We could add even more preliminary practices to this, but we could say that the main ones are these 5. So first, train in the preliminaries to what? The preliminaries in sense of these contemplations are the foundation for generating or bringing forth bodhicitta. And next we have the main practice, which is really training in bodhicitta. And so then don't forget that within that bodhicitta, we can speak of 2 kinds of bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. And that actually brings us now to where we are in the commentary. So for those of you who are following, I may change this later, but I believe we are on page 6 of Gyalse Tokme Zangpo's commentary. In the English, we should be on page 6. So since it is self-grasping that brings about suffering, we must view this self-grasping as the enemy. So what does that mean? That means every single discomfort, every single suffering that we experience, whether big or small, we can trace it back somehow to this self-grasping attitude. So having understood that, then if someone asks you who the true enemy is, right, we would say that the true enemy is this attitude of self-grasping.
인에서는 단디카도 나도 로요 거 손주세 거 계좌 이사 단지 말이 받지 보여 말다. 스텔레 로바 체크다 롱진데 되고 싶지 뭐지야.
And because of the context of this teaching, right, which is the lojong, the mind training, and really the development of bodhicitta, we understand here that we're talking about the subtle element of self-grasping, but we're also connected with that, talking about a coarser manifestation that we call self-cherishing.
다 롱진데서는 다르냐 리지 때거야 고노크네 어떻게 야 소화기 보는 거야. 아마 롱진데서는 소소 지보 대시 손도 예리도야 손지 알도 뭐냐 뒤야 그래서.
So some people, when they hear the term self-cherishing, it makes them a little bit uncomfortable. It's like, what? I'm not allowed to care about myself. So it's important to point at what this term is actually talking about. So when we say self-cherishing, we mean being so consumed by one's own self-concern that one completely neglects the needs of others. That's what self-cherishing means.
다 대주주소는 또 대대바이는 소소 짜치 뭐 짜네라.
Yeah.
소소 대시 되고 팀에 와서 대야 좀 물어봤어.
And actually the paradox here is that from holding on to our own happiness as paramount and caring only about ourselves, we actually undermine the causes of our own happiness.
뭐부터가 말이 파마 빈자 집아이나 로진즈 가제 슈체가 요다 모마 하고서라 강에 모아지 아래.
So really look at that, right? You can think of children that are born to the same family, right? They have the same parents, and based upon how strong their attitude of self-cherishing is, one of those people is a lot unhappier in life, right? We can see that. So when we talk about those problems on the family level, when we also look at the problems between nations, when we look at the problems that we experience globally, right? If we trace back the causality, we can see how they are connected to this ignorance grasping at the self and also this self-cherishing attitude. So ignorance grasping at the self, this first word in that phrase, ignorance, means an unknowingness. Ignorance grasping at the self is really connected with an unknowingness of how things really are. There's a nice phrase, a beautiful sounding phrase that says, having seen emptiness, liberation. Having not seen emptiness, samsara.
Papa yukoshungishibindo sa ndo chiares.
Pagpa kanis?
Papa yukoshungishibindo tati te
Ale. So it's coming from a sutra that Geshe is giving as Papa Yunkor Shungwe Do. So I'm gonna what I'll do is I will try to get Geshe to write this down for me and look it up for people to see if it's available. So many lamas actually quote this sutra, and in particular Lama Tsongkhapa really quotes this sutra in the Essence of Good Explanations.
But
really, in a capsule, what it is pointing to is what keeps us circling within samsara, what keeps us cycling around and around in cyclic existence is an unknowingness of emptiness, is not seeing or understanding emptiness. Once we get even just a glimpse of emptiness, just a brief glimpse of it, we've already opened the door to traveling towards liberation. So one of the great disciples of Gompo Lundrup
Loma.
Right? One of the great disciples of Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, he said, even just to have a doubt about emptiness, whether it is like this or whether it is like that, this shakes the very foundations of samsara, of cyclic existence.
어다 간주 니바 될 때인데 때마다 차로레스 트리바시 산로 그러와서 어디 이만에 되네 때때지 그래서
So Geshe said that in terms of Aryadeva, Geshe is confident. I still think but anyways, Geshe is confident that today we're going to finish Lama Tsongkhapa's in praise of dependent arising. And so once we finish that, then our kind of side topic, instead of in praise of dependent arising, we'll be doing Aryadeva's 400 verses.
다 차소돈도 말이 된 레가 같이 뭐 타마님에서 따이고 그때지 가서 됐던 거나 아니 뭐 로레를 가서 가서는 뭐 타마 갈래 갈 산로 그러와
So just to be clear, we probably won't be able to cover all 400 verses in the context of this teaching. So Geshe will select some important ones from among those 400 verses, but his hope is that eventually, slowly, by having this as an additional topic, we'll be able to complete the whole text.
다 간주 싸발 가고 있어지 뭐 자기
So Geshe just says one of the things he's noticed when a teaching goes on for a while is that people also want to have something new. So for also wanting something new, then we will have these 400 verses starting.
어디서
Also,
어디서 어다 던지지 다 간주 다실문도 다 놀도 다 단저 말이 봐도 로진진이 다 어디래
So going back to the text, since it is self-grasping that brings about suffering, we must view this self-grasping as the enemy. That tells us that the enemy is not something that is outside, right? The enemy is inside within our own mind. And to identify it, we know that it is this ignorance grasping at the self and self-cherishing.
다음에라 다든 준비 론디 미다 아무나 배달 다음에라 다든 준비 론디 코와 토마메 바니 다디바도 둥아 통제 시지 토와라 토도 마와라 니지 뇽발란 데세 통제 늘리 쉬시 너 코알레 어디비티바
So the mind that clings to a self where there is none has engendered all the suffering that we have experienced in samsara throughout beginningless time until now. It is this that causes all our attitudes of jealousy towards superiors, contempt towards inferiors, and rivalry towards equals. It is this that prevents us from becoming liberated from samsara, and that brings about all the suffering of harm from human and non-human interaction.
어다 네스시 원든데 시시라 자게 하면도 와서 어단서 말이 봐도 노진진이라 때네 다 토네 나자 토도 어단 데세 강가가니 좋은 거야.
So really not much to explain here because it's very clear in the text, but we just see that connected with these minds, mistaken minds of the ignorance grasping at the self and self-cherishing, there are all other sort of problematic minds such as jealousy, pride, and so forth that are manifesting.
어다 다두게 대시 파세죠. 답이 대시 파세죠. 니가게 대시고 매바서게 되지 다 서서 노는 것도 왔어.
So what to speak of ultimate happiness, ignorance grasping at the self and self-cherishing, they even destroy the causes of our temporary fleeting happiness.
어데레 너 고알레 마타와도 아까서와 너 고알레 마타와도 뭐도 뭐마이메 내발아서 봐 둥아 도체 니시바레 시바이데스.
So Geshe, just reading that last line again, it is this that prevents us from becoming liberated from samsara and that brings about all the suffering of harm from human and non-human interaction.
어단 소소소 고알레 뭐지 토마토바 타발은 토마토바 어단 네반다 만다마도 뭐마이메 네바 뭐 요다테 소시지에 말 소농게지에
So what blocks us from liberation and also like what is causing all of the harm of a seen and unseen beings, we understand that the main causes of those are not external things, right? The main causes of those are something internal, something within us.
어다시 인주일레 네 자토 통제도 코와달라 네바시 다는 캐노 제시데 체지롱데 셈바 좀.
So as we go now to the top of page 7 for those of you who are following, this is the one who hundreds of times in cyclic existence has done me harm. Now remembering these grievances, I shall crush your selfish attitude. The konso di rang chenzen dang din so di kangel trene ruangan so meba so gire.
다다바도 코알레 데비칼 강에 강가 콘솔 슈자데 다 데리바시네 다 데리게 단자 마리 바데도 로친데 밤에 봐서.
So recognizing, right, that the source of all of these problems, and in fact, what has kept us circling within samsara hundreds and hundreds of times, are this ignorance grasping at the self and the self-cherishing attitude. Then we develop the conviction that we must get rid of these. We must destroy them.
멀리 여보 레와 여보 다 전에 시라 비야 고신에 당인에 밤에 와서 이세요 아래서
With this human rebirth and this good human intelligence and wisdom, then we must bolster ourselves to destroy them.
예수님이 단지 노시잖아 따나 다 공용 문제 발라 지시를 다 던저시 단지 노시 디 차라 봉와도 실제 단지 다 진짜 마셔와 샤이신 배바샤 다 진짜 진짜 뭐需求 用的와 샤샤샤데 신주래요.
So continuing down, whenever self-grasping occurs, examination will show that there is no self at all. By questioning why we cling to such a self, we can abandon self-grasping just as it arises. Strive then to prevent this grasping of self-cherishing from occurring again in the future.
我大先就来这就可搞了，别人就地的人就年同大切共等着，切去这么个就下，他等这个年是日把现呢，当时马里别个也带我点把门头，我今这个上次带我点，原来要不然门头，那是上次路把人头带上呢，他没法说意思个是。
The time when you could harm me has passed and is here no more. I see you now. Where will you hide? I'll crush you in all your arrogance. So what this is saying is now having understood, right, the problems they cause, and having seen, right, that this is connected with self-cherishing and the ignorance grasping at the self, then we develop this very strong wish to be able to destroy it.
我大天呐，就是等你一站，那是等你就要一站，那把这学用当时就我问题两把烟呗，都折腾了，别把下的。
Thus, whatever harms we face are the fault of this demon of self-grasping. We must do whatever we can to tame it. As Shawopa said, today, in this short life, subjugate this demon, I beg you.
我当年在干的是学完以后，他说给看看老的了，那土上到我的课当时马里巴的，他让我进这上这个带了去顶我的推的。
So we identifying where all of these faults are coming, right? And they are coming from this ignorance grasping at the self, what we could also say from this self-cherishing. So we identify that we need to tame this.
别人那都是西都经过了俺家呢了，说说马上呢，但是大说呢。
Yeah.
还可是了，他有的时候
신통 마산에.
Yeah.这个是家呢了。
Yeah.
说说马上呢，这刚开学呢。
Yeah.
还可是了。
하고서.
我说说有的是吧人嘛多。
Yeah.
我小路人这个主要门的话。
So our way of seeing things now, Geshe is just giving an analogy. It's a little bit like we climb up a tree and we fall down and we break our arm or something. Well, do we blame the tree for breaking our arm? No, right? We see that the cause was something inside ourselves. It was a decision that we made. This is a little bit like that.
我打电话我是这个样的，说打写一件那这弄完路把我下个样的，这马儿大，说弄呢就做呀，对呢，要这去办的。
So all of the outer causes and conditions that we're like so obsessed with identifying as causing us problems, we're kind of missing the point, right? Because the causes that are kind of underpinning them all are something internal, something inside ourselves.
我打小比下呢，大理这切断的啦，我问的就的记着查水啥。 他大理没成的了，但是偷到他等这个人进去当时马里巴的，他没怕没法做，他是这个意思。
So Shawopa said, today in this short life, subjugate this demon, I beg you. So really talking to himself to as much as possible, try to undermine that self-cherishing attitude.
哦，样的是吗？的是，用肉的这边说着了，没下一面的，也的这边说着了，气味没给到了，是。
Someone whose intentions and actions are directed towards securing their own well-being warrants the name of layperson.
哦，也的这边的什么？给些人别其他，给些别国家下当地的哇。
Yeah.
说来的乌龙下个，我是给些别去下呢，但是现在看过那边的土地呢了，对吧？明白？ 也下去没。
Yeah. So, while someone whose intentions and actions are directed towards the benefit of others is worthy of the name of Dharma practitioner, let us therefore avoid and adopt according to Geshe Ben's tradition. For it was Geshe Ben who said, now I shall hold the spear of the antidote at the gateway of the mind. If it is vigilant, I shall be vigilant too. If it is relaxed, I shall relax as well. So Geshe, I was just saying to Geshe, this is the story, right? That he often, Geshe often tells the story about the Geshe So now we know who it is. It's Geshe Ben Gyal. The Geshe who talked to his afflictions was like, if you kind of back off, then I'll relax. But if you start creating problems, I'll be even more vigilant.
내가 니빠 때도 당 안주 뭐 몰라사래. 딩 동보진도 아땡 안주 다 뭐좀 바실라요. 맞다.
So Geshe just reflecting that he's probably talked about the second part of this. If it is vigilant, I'll be vigilant too. If it's relaxed, I'll relax as well. But he doesn't think that he shared with you the first line, which is, now I shall hold the spear of the antidote at the gateway of the mind. Yeah. So here, actually, Geshe Ben is comparing our mind to a house. Dung. Yeah. How goes it? Yep. And so holding the spear, it's like the person who is guarding outside of the door. And so what Geshe Ben is saying is that our main kind of practice is to guard the door of the house of our mind and make sure, right, that the afflictions and so forth cannot get in. Yeah. And so therefore, right, if the afflictions are not approaching the door, the spear person can kind of sit down and relax a bit. So he'll relax. But if the afflictions are coming, then he has to stand up and make sure they don't get inside. So then he will be vigilant. Yeah. So if we don't check our mind and we don't guard our mind and we're not aware of what's happening, right, we're not even aware of when the afflictions come in, right? And so many problems can arise from that. Oh. Yep. Yeah.
And the one that take Tavado
So there's a story of a great Mongolian Lama who was studying the Vinaya, the texts on monastic discipline. And within those texts on monastic discipline, it talks about the seating that is appropriate for monks and nuns. And one of the things that it mentioned as inappropriate was animal hides or skins. So because Tibet was such a cold climate, right, didn't have microfibers and things like that, he noticed that he was actually sitting on like maybe a piece of leather or some kind of sheepskin. So having seen that in the discipline text, it is said he kind of stood up very suddenly and he flung the sitting mat away and told his disciples to take it away.
아니 때에서 말로 내 쇼기 니빠산 내그리라 손지가 너와노라 용
Yeah.
미 대고 몇개도 리포 대고 몇개 얘는 어디 주세는 또 미세지 요아레스
But as he read in the text of discipline, he saw in the Vinaya that the Buddha made an exception that for those who are miki kange dankare kange. So for those who are infirm, in other words, for those who are prone to cold, arthritis, or bad eyesight, they are allowed to sit on those seat coverings. So then it is said that he called his students back and asked them to bring back the leather mat. Yeah. So, and he thought, how kind is the Buddha that he would make an exception for me, kind of thing. But the impressive thing here, at least to Geshe, was that this is somebody who reads an instruction and wants to put it into practice right away, right? So in a way, that's a really good thing. No, so a nice story.
Oh, this. Oh yeah, Geshe to Charlie Washako, this one. Danzala Datini Pon, Dala Shopishani, Gumbo Gonzuchi Chi Sungo, Teta Danzala Datini, Jechipa, Danzas Ruchi, the Runchins the Renditandira.
Yeah.
Teta Danzala Datini, Jechipa Zunisher, 그라 가디체와 고시스위트 다단다 단지 세대한테 저
Yeah.
정신들이 조지는데 다.
So just as we continue here, we're at about the middle of page 7. Viewing self-grasping as the enemy and avoiding it is what Shaopa called the dharma of exercising the demon, so that we might regard self-grasping as the enemy and embrace the cherishing of others instead, the root text said. So Geshe is just explaining that from here, we can see that although they talk about self-grasping, which we usually think of in terms of the ignorance grasping at the self, we can see from the second part of this, of the line, embrace the cherishing of others, we can see here self-grasping is actually really talking about self-cherishing. So that's what's meant here. So Geshe wonders maybe like you could understand it in both ways, because we've also talked about like how grasping at an inherently existent self is part of the problem. So maybe you could understand it in both ways. So the root text says, meditate on the great kindness of all. So generally speaking, all beings have been our kind parents in the course of beginningless time. They were thus very kind to us in the past. In addition, the attainment of unsurpassable enlightenment also depends on sentient beings. So we see that all sentient beings, nothing so difficult to understand here, all sentient beings could have been, any number of sentient beings could have been our father, our mother in previous lifetimes, so they've shown us the kindness of parents. And similarly, we've also mentioned many times how even achieving enlightenment, right, this really does require a dependence upon sentient beings. So we could say actually that even the happiness of the humans and devas, this depends upon sentient beings who allow us to enable the karma to achieve that. Similarly, liberation from samsara, this is only possible through training in regards to sentient beings, and certainly bringing forth bodhicitta and eventually achieving full enlightenment. This is only possible in dependence upon sentient beings. And so it is said that having contemplated this, if we were to say who was kinder, sentient beings or the Buddhas, we could not say who was kinder. You'd have to say like 50% it's the Buddhas and 50% it is sentient beings. So if we develop conviction about this point, we kind of have no choice but to see sentient beings as something pleasant and precious. So we see that Buddhas and So if all of our happiness and attainments depends upon others, that's a relationship of dependent arising. And so now we will turn to our discussion of the text on dependent arising. So if we actually look at the various spiritual practices that we find in Buddhism, we can see that there are practices which are practiced by both Buddhists and by those holders of outside traditions. So holders of outside traditions in this sense means the other spiritual traditions of ancient India. In effect. So we could say, though, that dependent arising, emptiness, and bodhicitta, these are unique facets of the Buddha's teaching. But if you understand that these other practices, like the recitation of mantras and dharanis and so forth, these are practiced by many spiritual traditions, then merely reciting a mantra without a motivation of bodhicitta or an understanding of dependent arising, it's actually just the same as any of these other spiritual traditions when they recite a mantra. So therefore, dependent arising, dependent origination is an uncommon characteristic of the Buddha's holy Dharma. So we are very fortunate to have reached, Geshe is giving it as verse number 41 of in praise of dependent arising. So for those of you following in the translation that we're using, we are on the 4th page, and I believe the 2nd paragraph from the bottom. For this knowledge you gave away over countless eons again and again, your loved ones, your possessions, sometimes your body, other times your life. So we understand that great beings to really be able we understand that in order to achieve this knowledge, then the Buddha was willingly able to give away his body, possessions, wealth, and so forth, to be able to uncover this fundamental truth of dependent arising. So also this should help us reflect on our own good fortune at the access we have to the study and practice of the Buddha's teachings, right? To a very full study and practice of the Buddha's teachings, where we know that in previous lifetimes as a bodhisattva, that the Buddha had to give away his life even just for one verse of Dharma, because the Dharma was that rare sometimes. So our situation is totally different, right? Whatever we want to study, whatever we want to practice, right? Those practices and those instructions are available to us. So that's really quite incredible. Yeah. Seeing such qualities, I am drawn by your mind, like a fish on the hook, not hearing your Dharma from you in person, such misfortune. Lama Tsongkhapa, right? And so this is Lama Tsongkhapa kind of expressing a regret or a lament. Yeah. So seeing the Buddha as like a fisherman who is using his hook of compassion to take sentient beings out of the ocean of samsaric suffering, really seeing how amazing that is, then the Lama Tsongkhapa expresses regret at not having the good fortune and affinity to be able to meet with the Buddha when he was alive. So by the pain of such sorrow, my mind will never give you up, like the mind of a mother for her precious child. And yet, as I think on your words, hearing you talk of this and that, teacher with a voice as melodic as Brahma, resplendent with teachers of perfection, encircled by garlands of light, your enlightened form reflects in my mind like cool light of the moon, medicine for feverish torment.
그것은 재송보 수지자니
yeah.
배제송보 제죠
Yeah.
하고서라와 어다 던지 그랬더니 순게 예터지마 지 제네라 소지게 치수도지 지 제거들라 디게제 디가 다 다가로 포게 사이강에 정보질을 나이 나와 샤게 강에 면로 그러와 어때든 좋아서
Okay. Sorry. It was a big chunk of information and it came really quickly.
세시오
So I'm gonna do my
단기강에
best.
주송하서
Yeah, not you.
이나요 손지저 된데 그래서 거로포게 손징에서 요반다고 주니에 포게 손노 돈이라
Yeah.
치수마도 그 예때 대지 손노 도게
Ale.
아니 차이강에 될 나와 샤와 무지 다 강에
Right.
생도
So Lama Tsongkhapa, sorry. So Lama Tsongkhapa, he's Geshe was surprised I couldn't follow. It was a big chunk of info for me. So apologies. So having kind of expressed that regret, right, at not being able to meet the Buddha when he was here, but then thinking about the Buddha's qualities of holy body, speech, and mind, the 32 marks and the 80 signs, right? These are like kind of beautiful, amazing things like garlands of light. And that light is like the light of the moon, which is cooling, which can protect us from the heat of the sun, which is likened to samsaric suffering.
어다 손징이서는 되는 뒤야 말했더니 다 손지저 되는 다 수마라 왔어 단다 로조시 되냐로시 되야 간가 어다 대지지 제가 되는 손지가 수도르지 제가 되는 되는 강에 되지 로메 바다 인도서
So having not met the Buddha in person, expressing regret, but through the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, holy body, speech, and mind still being present, one can study and practice, and in this way, one can still achieve freedom.
그래서
Loso. Kale.
알레 대백가
말이
대단해도 중앙이 로조 대요 먹게 시오 바반 자저도 너바 건데 지바시
소양서 카오였단다.
이제 제주 봐.
Oh, okay, so here we go. So we are continuing. Those unwise in this wonderful doctrine were confused and entangled like plaited grass. Seeing this, I followed with diligence the great scholars, seeking again and again your thoughts, poring over many works of ours and other traditions, yet still my mind was torn by doubts. Yeah. So the Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni, expressing this kind of supreme doctrine of dependent arising, right? But yet people were not able to completely comprehend it. And so their study and their practice became entangled like plaited grass. So I think that this is belbadza. Belbadza is a kind of grass that grows together all kind of tangled and you can't pull it apart. Yeah. So the students could only listen to the explanations of the teachings, but they could not really discern the view completely. And we can see that actually, right, through people who had different understandings of the Buddha's teachings, which is why we have this division of the different philosophical systems of the Vaibhasikas, the Sautantrikas, and so forth. So really, out of the people who are trying to kind of explain the Buddha's view, there are only some that are really discerning the view correctly up till the present day. So when, with the kindness of my lamas, I saw this unsurpassed vehicle of yours leaving behind the extremes of existence and non-existence, elucidated by the prophesied Nagarjuna, his lotus grove illuminated by moonlight. So looking again and again at those commentaries and coming to understand. Yep.
다
야보코그마.
땡지티라
소소 카리송송 야보코마송. Sorry.
세시오스 아마조가 베바 타마스인지 쳔비고네라
베바 쳔. Okay, 칼레송당.
베바 타마스 쳔지 쳔보세기 와라와
선주 쳔보.
소소 고니모터 거 말해 아니 가윙고네 다 땡지트니 타왕이네 들어봐서기
So having kind of understood through the commentaries and striving with joyous effort, then Lama Tsongkhapa is expressing joy at being able to uncover the true meaning. And so through those commentaries, really able to discern the real meaning of the Buddha's intent. Again. So Geshe said we still have, we're not going to finish in praise of dependent arising today, but there's still some paragraphs left. Yeah, and as we kind of come closer to finishing this text and it comes time to cover Aryadeva's 400 verses, we'll somehow get a message out to people about like which verses we're covering ahead of time. No, I just was going so fast, sorry. So Geshe said, so having said that, then let us pause the teaching here. Yeah. So Geshe said for those who with highest yoga tantra empowerment who are going to be joining the Haruka Chakra Samvara teachings next Saturday. So we've been explaining, some people have been following just because they're practicing the 5 deity Gantapada, or they're practicing the body mandala Gantapada. They maybe are following with those sadhanas, but there's some words in particular in Luipa's sadhana that are very important. So he's just asking that people have that text ready to look at on Saturday. So the thing is, even if one has received the Chakra Samvara empowerment in the Gantapa tradition of the 5 deity or the body mandala and not received the Luipa empowerment, there's some information contained within the Luipa sadhana that is actually beneficial for all practitioners of Chakra Samvara. So just a few lines, but very important and useful, Geshe thinks. So he'll be highlighting those in the next session. So thank you very much. We shall end here. So let us dedicate the merits nicely. And of course, afterwards, if you need to get on with your day, please do. And if you'd like to stick around for questions, most welcome. Changcho semcho rinpoche mache panam chejo rechi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondo pewa resho tongni tawa rinpoche mache panam chejo rechi chewa nyamba meba yang Gone gondu bewar sho jambe bao jindar kyamba tang kundu zangpo de on de jinde de da gunge jesu da lo jir gewa de da tam je ra du mo du sun shepe gewa tam je ge ngowa gan la chodu ngaba de Dagi gewe tsawa di gun kyong Zangpo choji radu ngowa ki. So through the power of the merits that myself and all others have collected, may those sentient beings who possess evil thoughts, may those evil thoughts be cleared away, and may they give rise to thoughts that are wholesome.
너는 중하지 내가 뭐게 뭐죠 내가 내가 가 이나요 다 가지 뜻도 봐셔둬야지.
Through these merits, may the imbalance of the four elements leading to natural disasters be cleared away. May wars and conflicts be cleared away.
너는 저와리 주간가 대식 반념하셔도
Through these merits, may the sun of happiness shine without exception on all six types of beings within samsara.
수소이나 로그 받아가서 더 절대 못 하지.
And through these merits, may I be able to accomplish the path of my Dharma practice.
왜 되지?
So we'll pause there. And there is time for questions if people would like to ask questions.
좋아요는 저와도 쇼스.
Don't be shy. Go ahead. Geshe said, if you have a question, please ask.
저만데
No questions? Is anything coming in on the socials, Abhilash or Dave? Oh, go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
But it's not about today. It's in general. If you have a daily Buddhist practice,
Yep.
what would you recommend? What do you do on a daily basis?
So nima reje nampegi nyamlen sona, tene nima reje nyamlen yaksha kareres. So nima reje soye chigyona.
니마레레서 해야지 연아.
Yeah. Kande sogores roa. Yeah. Nyamlen nima reje nyamlen kande sogore tonda.
니마레는 원래 간데서 가르서 다 당길라야 되라 왔어. 어느 로를 주고 생제 세이나에 다 녀자치 뭐. 하고서라 가르침보 연마서는 또 더나 다대
So one of the main practices would really be to contemplate how all six types of sentient beings within samsara are connected to us, how they are close to us, how they have been kind to us. So to contemplate that. And thinking in this way, this feeling of connectedness to all sentient beings, in this way, there is none who is our enemy, who is far away from us. And this is really important in the beginning because that's the basis through which we can bring forth all the qualities we want in our daily practice. And what you'll find if you contemplate this every day is you'll be a little bit happy because it will counter this habit of always pointing outside. That person made us unhappy. He made me unhappy. She made me unhappy. Always looking to that outside fault finding as the causes of unhappiness. It will help us to address that. Yeah, because honestly, if we had to get rid of everything in the external world that was bothering us, there's not enough like days in our life left to do that, right? And as soon as we defeat one, another one is going to come, isn't it? So when you think every one of those last sentient beings is connected to me and is precious, and when they do make mistakes or annoy me, that is just because they have been under the power of the afflictions, but they are still just as kind and precious. That will really bring forth a great change within the mind.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. Anybody else?
I have a question about equanimity. I feel like in the practice of it that my equanimity now is more cheerful in a certain way. And then that way it doesn't seem that neutral. And so I am asking about the levels of equanimity that you apply to practice, I guess.
Tangyom gisem di rwa lung maten chik reduas ine tangyom gisem mambo nyamlen china dene tangyom la tene dewa chik yongyores kiwa chik yongyores dene tangyom gisem di lung maten labia tets kalikapores tangyom gisem rimba chene dronana dene nganso semyang kiru drogres mato jen lung maten de gresa.
Me tuñoge se me se coro tuñoge se ras. Se tuñol deba ina. Ota se nikachi to shawachin do tene te chibo ko ya jinro to was.
So the first thing to understand here is that when we cultivate this mind of equanimity, because it is what is considered a neutral mind, right? In the presentation of different minds and so forth, there's like a feeling of peacefulness that comes about. But that peacefulness is not the end of it, right? That's not the final destination, really.
Ta shomba de ni ji go mes.
Yeah. Yeah. Marine ko tangyom gi semdi nganso de jampadang ningjegi ngunro chik samlo tangge resarwa.
Me tedun do ya was. Tunyog se nganso nyeri chado go tunyog se ji ya was.
Yeah.
Ti o do chembo chin do res.
Kare jok chembo.
Somba ni ji chulun do ya chi ya wa.
Yeah. Ine di korongi chigo mare. Ko tangyom di lung maten rese gi duas. Ine di samlo tangna dene tes dewa yongi yo chang lung maten rang samlo tangyo mare se gi du.
Me ta tedo kola tene yaga momoshi ayo was.
Yeah.
So
a long story short, Annie, Geshe would say that equanimity is fundamentally a neutral mind, but because it is a neutral mind that is the basis for bringing forth many positive qualities that lead us to happiness, maybe you associate a happy feeling with it. Loso. And actually, that mind of equanimity, because it is fundamentally neutral, depending on what we cultivate afterwards. So after we've established that basis, depending on what we cultivate afterwards, it can be a cause for something relatively unpleasant or a cause for something relatively pleasant. So the feeling of equanimity, if you were to ask what kind of feeling is it, right? The texts say it is a neutral feeling. It is neither a feeling of pleasant or unpleasant. Why do the texts talk about it this way? Because a feeling of equanimity can lead to a feeling of suffering. It doesn't necessarily lead to a feeling of happiness. Yeah, so it can go together with either happiness or suffering. Because equanimity can go together either with happiness or suffering, that tells us that as a mind, it's essentially neutral. Yeah, so we talk about kind of a neutral mind and equanimity in the same sense. So tangyom di jampadang ningje. Yeah, but it's also important to be clear about what kind of equanimity we're talking about. So we can also talk about the equanimity, which is an antidote to holding some beings far away and other beings closer to us. And that's not just kind of that beginner feeling of equanimity, right? That's an equanimity that is a powerful antidote.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Hi there.
So self-cherishing, when you first mentioned it, I took it as a positive thing. It could be the Western mind thinking that cherishing ourselves is a good move. And I want to clarify that self-cherishing means not putting our needs ahead of others.
No, it means putting our needs ahead of others.
Okay.
The opposite. It's being so consumed with our own happiness that we disregard others.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I want to confirm. Nganso di rang chains in di rwa di samlo tang na chichina noob chokla nganso tets yapo dabochik tongi re duas ine rang chains in sen nganso kiwa di ke chesha sine jendak samlo tang mago bachi. It's the Geshe is describing it as it's like a disregard for others.
Okay.
The self-cherishing implies a disregard for others.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm glad I asked.
And so that's what we have to get rid of. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm glad I asked. Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Could you?
Yeah, and Geshe said the Buddhist path does propose a way for us to meet our own welfare, right? Our own happiness, right? Out of the two bodies of a Buddha, the Dharmakaya, the truth body, and the Rupakaya, the form body, the Dharmakaya is the one through which we achieve our own welfare, right? So our own welfare is part of that.
Could you explain at their root the self-grasping and self-cherishing? Are they not related anyhow at their root? And is there a way to uproot them at their roots so simultaneously you rid self-cherishing and self-grasping?
So Sam, you're asking about like, is there, if the self-cherishing and the self-grasping are related, is there a way to like uproot something that will get rid of them simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Nganso di rang chenjin dangzin seria di roa tsawachik yoribes ane tsawachik meba soela tene dangzin dang rang chenjin niga meba so tugirebes kogichiwa dire.
So to
if you had to propose a root for these, a root of that's kind of like sprouting these two various minds, you could say that the fundamental root would be ignorance, actually. And so the self-grasping ignorance, the ignorance grasping out of self, it comes from a fundamental unknowingness of how things are. And so in that sense, this self-grasping ignorance is kind of the root of all of samsara. Mare dene rang chenzen dang di niga mebasoya di tu mongwe gi tsawa yona di kandis mebasogres chua dire dua. Yeah. But there's not a root that you can sort of dig up that will get rid of both this self-grasping ignorance and the self-cherishing mind, because to get rid of both the self-grasping ignorance and the self-cherishing mind, you need aspects of both the method and the wisdom practices. You can't have just one or the other. Yeah. So because they are two fundamentally distinct mistaken ways of thinking, they require two kind of appropriate antidotes. And so in a capsule, there's intersection, but in a capsule, what we could say is it is through the perfect application of wisdom that the self-grasping ignorance is uprooted, and it is through the perfect application of method, in other words, the practices of love, compassion, and so forth, that perfectly uproots self-cherishing. And so that's why in the sutric presentation, right, the bodhisattva, he or she has to meditate for a long time, because they need to alternate the practices of method and wisdom to be able to defeat the different types of mistaken minds. Was that clear, Sam?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good.
And one could not just slay the pig and uproot everything at once with wisdom and method.
Yeah, it depends on
wisdom and method to the pig, and slaying the pig wouldn't get rid of all of it at once.
Yeah, nganso pagpachik sene niga mepaso tugyo mares, nganso taptang shirab niga gogires, matoje niga pang tugyo marerwa. Tek me yuna dene chibodrona tigre dorwa. Yeah, so that's right, Sam. But I was just commenting to Geshe, like for the Shravakayana, right? For the practitioner who he or she is thinking of their own liberation, then you don't need the practice of method. You just need the practice of wisdom. And Geshe said, yes, that's correct. They practice wisdom by itself to uproot that ignorance for their own liberation. But because they are thinking only of their own liberation, that shows that there's still a little bit of an aspect of self-cherishing there, right? Because they're not considering others.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
And Geshe actually said that this is also why it's easier to achieve, it's quicker, we should say, quicker to achieve liberation for oneself than to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all, because really it's just that single factor of wisdom that needs to be cultivated to achieve that individual liberation.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah,
so Geshe said it's pretty attractive. So he says, don't consider liberation for yourself alone. Everybody try to have that bigger motivation because it is very tempting, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to ask something? And are we quiet on the socials today? Is there anything on Facebook or anything? Okay, all right. Yeah, so it looks like
I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Deki Lee. Yes, I don't see you on my screen, but I guess that's because I can't see everyone at once. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Yes, absolutely.
I didn't put an official hand up. I put my hand up.
No, go for it. Go for it. No problem.
Okay. I'm very kinesthetic. So a lot of these teachings are very, like they're auditory, and I'm always trying to translate them into experience. So I'm sitting here in my living room trying to apply this. And as I look out the window, like what I'm playing with it. So let me know if I'm on point or I'm missing the point. What I'm playing with is just the fact that every single thing I'm experiencing are my glasses. You know, they're there, but they're all my glasses, and I'm creating it all. Like, would that be a simplified way of saying, okay, I created it all, it's all samsara, I get the choice?
Yes, no, I can ask that. And so just to be clear, Deki Lee, like you mean glasses in this sense, right? It's like the lens through which you're seeing everything. Yeah. Na dene korangi chiwa dire duang anso tsik mambo nang la ko sam peda bochik samlo tang tangya tapshi chegiyores. Dene nganso di samlo tangya di samlo tangna dene nganso korwe kare tongna nangwa kare tongna chatsangwa ngarang sogyoki mikshegi gyune sogire dua chitang denje impa indu nga korwa chatsangwa sotsayins ane kare tongna ngarang mikshegi gyune tongi yores di samlo tangna jigire besa yeah karin sena mikshegi gyune dene ngarang sogi mindrawa dabochi tongtang chi dua di segi yoresa
yeah den dabochi res chi tong yor
yes. So it's correct in the sense of what we're seeing. There's an element of what it is there, but because of these glasses, we're not seeing it exactly as it is. So in that sense, the analogy works. Yes. So I think he would argue that you're creating all of samsara because the person that you're seeing, it's not like there's no person there at all, right? But our way of seeing them is through the lens of our own misunderstanding and ignorance. So the way that we see them is not necessarily in accord with reality of how they really are. So we could say that the glasses that you're talking about in this analogy, it's like the ignorance grasping at the self and the imprints left behind by that ignorance. And those are the glasses which are leading to like this distorted, or maybe inaccurate is a better word, inaccurate perception of what is out there.
Thanks.
Yeah, yes, no problem. You're welcome. Would anyone else? Yeah, so Geshe said if there's nothing else, then perhaps we should end here, and he wishes you all wellness and happiness, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy your holidays.
Thank you, Venerable
Thank you.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody, and get well soon, Kimberly. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
We'll stop the streaming, but we're here to hang out and chat and visit for a bit, just like in a normal physical place. Anybody has anything to want to just hang out.